Do you want to live more sustainably but aren't sure where to start or how it fits in with your everyday living? The ReNewy Living Podcast simplifies sustainability so you can feel confident to take small, meaningful actions that fit into your lifestyle. Based on the lands of the Awabakal and Worimi people in Newcastle, Australia, you'll learn how to live lighter on our planet through practical ideas, stories from like-minded people, and examples of businesses doing great things. With an open heart and mind, join me, Mardi Lee, as we explore how to consume less, build stronger community connections, and thrive in your neighbourhood, wherever you call home. Welcome to the ReNewy Living Podcast. Hello, I'm Mardi Lee, and welcome to the ReNewy Living Podcast. Ever wondered whether community gardens are there just for veggie growing? In this episode, you'll hear how one local community garden is evolving from a growing food-only garden to becoming a biodiversity haven. Joining me is Katie Ryan from the Groundswell Collective. Katie's role at the Shelley Street Community Garden in Toronto, New South Wales, is helping guide the garden from purely food production to something that's more suited to the area. The garden is moving towards building an ecosystem that supports native species, the permaculture principles, and the whole community. Let's hear her story to see how the garden unfolded and continues to grow and change. G'day, Katie.
Hey, Mardi. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. What is that story that you have, that personal story behind the Shelley Street Community Garden?
So towards the end of 2024, the Groundswell Collective was approached by a beautiful lady whose name is Colleen. And her story is the story of Shelley Street Garden. So she was downsizing from a farm out near Denman and had moved into Toronto, but a tiny backyard was not enough space for her to garden after coming from a farm. So she bought a block in Shelley Street where a house used to stand. It actually was burnt down in an act of arson in about 2016, and it had been left vacant since then. And she saw that it had the perfect sort of north to rear aspect for gardening, and she bought it so that she had more space to garden. And then she used it for a couple of years, but unfortunately her health and advancing age meant that it was just too much for her to do by herself. So she came to the Groundswell Collective back in August and said, can you use this for the community? Can you keep a garden going? Can you involve some people? She said, I just wanted to have a community on it. And so we thought about it at the Groundswell, and we reached out to some people who were already volunteering in other community gardens because we obviously needed some help to take this on. It couldn't just be us. And we had initially about half a dozen, maybe 10 volunteers come along. And we did a big cleanup day. And from there, we decided to meet every Friday, and the Shelley Street Community Garden was born.
That's such a beautiful story because particularly for your benefactor who has made that transition from a large property. Toronto is a suburban place in Lake Macquarie in New South Wales. And so when you move from farm to suburbia, it can be quite a challenge. So for her to have that block of land to be used as farming land, suburban farming land for herself is perfect. And then, of course, it sounded like she needed that next transition, that she actually needed help and support. And so gifting that to you to be the stewards of and develop a community garden, not just for the benefit of her, but for the benefit of the community is such a well-meaning endeavour.
Yeah, and because she was new to Toronto, she just didn't have that community to reach out to. And I don't even know how she came across the Groundswell, but she realised, that was who she wanted to reach out to. And from there, and she's still involved in the garden. She comes along of a Friday morning, and because she lives so close, she waters it on the hot days and that sort of thing. So she's very much still involved and still guiding what we're going to do there as well. So it's beautiful.
So what are you doing at this particular community garden?
Our first, I guess the first phase was to grow food. So we went into it. Colleen already had about 5 or 6 raised beds on the lot. And we said, right, the beds are there. Let's just get plants in the ground and start growing some food. Knowing that obviously that takes a little bit of time from start to finish. And so our first phase was food with the intention to produce as much as we can, give some back to the volunteers who are helping, and then share it with our neighbours. So Shelley Street is most of the street is public housing. It's a lower socioeconomic area. And when we started, of course, it was, all the talk was around cost of living, and the price of things in the supermarkets, especially fresh food, was going up and up and up. So we thought, right, well, maybe we can help with this. And we, grew our tomatoes and our cucumbers and our zucchinis and all the things. And thankfully we were at the right time of year in spring to grow some good stuff. And then we put a sign on the front fence to tell the neighbours what we were doing, because obviously they'd be curious and wonder about these new people in their neighbourhood. And we invited them to come over to join us on a Friday morning, and a couple of them called in and said g'day and, made a connection. And then as time went by and we had some veggies to harvest, we would take them around and knock on doors of our neighbours and say, can you use a cucumber? Would you like some tomatoes? Can you use some rocket? That sort of thing. And some of them said yes, and some of them said no, thank you. But we were sort of slowly building some connections from there. So phase 1 was very much around food and just, I think, gently easing into the street and the community to let people know, that we were friend, not foe, and that we were there to help in any way we can. And so now we have regular chats with a couple of the neighbours on either side. They come out and see us and have let us plug into their PowerPoints at some point when we're doing construction work and things. So I think we're slowly becoming part of the streetscape.
A community garden means different things to different people. Often it's deep set in the community garden is there for food produce and it's there for the community. Now, you mentioned earlier that you've got a whole bunch of volunteers that help you on a Friday, invited the neighbours to come in and to help. But because it's on a private property, it's a very determined time that you are there at the garden. And then the fruits of your labour are different to perhaps what you intended. Where do you see community as a word or a term when you first started to what your community looks like now?
I think I personally have gained a community that I didn't expect to, because I've only ever gardened by myself in my backyard. I've never gardened with other people. And so that was a bit of an adjustment for me. And it was a wonderful adjustment, because I realized, firstly, you can get so much more done, and it's much less challenging on the body to share these tasks than, to try to do everything by yourself. So it's been lovely to make those friendships and connections and have our little community there, and to feel part of the street as well, and to feel that the garden is, I guess, looked over to some extent, like watched over. People are sort of keeping an eye on it, which is lovely as well. And then I would turn also to the non-human community. So I mentioned that phase 1 was for us getting food production happening, and phase 2 is very much about the non-human community. So the area around doesn't have a lot of mature trees or native flowering plants, anything to feed the bugs and the pollinators and, the animals and all that sort of thing. So phase 2, while we've been doing little bits of that as we go, we're very much wanting to get some support for biodiversity and pollinators and, our non-human community. Bring in some water sources as well. It's quite hot and dry in Toronto. So, those communities of volunteers and the wider street, and also our non-human community as well, that we're slowly building and supporting.
How does that shift actually happen, where you start with a food-based garden and you're going to maintain that food-based garden, but now you see the importance and the relevance of creating a bigger biodiverse environment based on just the local neighbourhood? How are you making that shift?
It's a few factors coming together there. So when you're gardening or when I'm gardening, you know that you need to provide food for the pollinators as well as providing food for people or growing food for people. They go hand in hand, and you don't get your zucchinis pollinated unless you're providing food for the bees, as an example. So it was always going to be a combination. We just took advantage of the beds that were there first. And also, we wanted to get to know the land as well. We can see on a map where the sun's going to go. But until you've spent some time there and understood, in summer and winter, what does that do? What does the wind do? Where does the water go when we have a big rain event? Those sorts of things. So we needed a bit of time to understand what is happening on the land. And as that's unfolded, which is, it kind of happened perfectly synchronistically with us spending a bit of time just doing the food production, we've come to understand, the lowest point at the back of the block where we've got a frog hotel, and we're going to put in a little frog bog with a habitat wall around it for all the lizards and skinks and things. And so those things, they've just unfolded over time, along with things like being gifted resources that we were kind of like, we don't really have a budget for the garden, right? So we were gifted 2 garden sheds, and then they take time. And we had a volunteer step forward with construction knowledge, and he said, I'll help you do that. So it's unfolded at a slower pace than I'm probably used to working with, but more at the pace of life or the pace of nature. The next step has revealed itself perfectly at the right time without us being able to rush into anything.
I think you've said it so beautifully, because these, like, nature and gardening isn't a fast-paced thing. It does help us slow down. And it sounds like there are so many positive opportunities that have come out of those initial challenges. It's impossible to have a community garden without having a shed and without having a toilet for the volunteers, or, as the frog pond down the back. I think that shows how things can just naturally grow.
It really did happen that way. It just reveals itself as like, oh, and now we need this, and now we need that, and now here are the resources for that. So yeah, it's like nature provides, right? That whole concept, and it just really has unfolded in the most amazing way.
It's a really lovely garden. What is it, about 500 or so square metres? So a nice, generous residential block size, which does fit neatly in amongst the houses that are there. And it's an absolute hive of activity, as you said, on a Friday morning when you're there. And a community garden works because of leadership and commitment with volunteers. And I think that that's what I can see evidenced already with you as the driving force for this garden.
I call myself the coordinator of the garden, but I feel it's definitely a democracy. So when it comes to sort of the general direction of the garden, I mean, I've done sort of permaculture plans and, really sort of felt into the maximum of what it could be, knowing full well that all of that probably won't come to pass. But when it comes to the general direction or do you think we should do this, or what would you put down there? Like, everyone gets to have a say. And I guess going back to, our benefactor, Colleen. So I mentioned before, she really guides what's happening at the garden. And an example of that is that part of phase 2 and the biodiversity work is on Colleen's farm. She used to grow wildflowers, a lot of proteas and South Africans and Australian versions of those too. And so we said, well, can we do that here? Will you share your wisdom with us so that we can grow those flowers here? So we've reserved a couple of sunny patches, and one of our next projects will be to make those beds to grow those in. I'm secretly hoping we can grow waratahs. And I know that's a big ask. Anyone who's ever heard anything about waratahs will know that they are difficult as all get out. But Colleen is, quietly confident, I think, that we should at least give it a go. So stay tuned. We may one day have waratahs at Shelley Street.
Oh, look, I hope so, because they are a challenge to grow. They do, love sandy soil, often seen in the coast. So good luck with that, because they're an absolute exquisite flower.
Thanks. We'll need it.
It's really great to hear that the benefactor is being involved in some kind of decision making as well. And the way that it goes, the benefactor may not always be there and gift you this garden. So, I mean, what does that mean as a long-term vision for the garden?
It's had an impact already because when we have been building things on the site, I'm always thinking we can only build things, so garden sheds, for example, in a way that can be disassembled and removed from the block. So we didn't use concrete slabs for the garden sheds. We had other methods that we can remove. So we're thinking about that all the time whenever we're doing any, infrastructure on the block. I mean, it's the same for anything. A garden changes all the time, and it can be packed up and moved on. It can be, just disassembled and left where it is, anything like that. So we know it's not there forever. But I kind of, in my mind, I refer back to the cycles of nature when it comes to that. Like, nothing is forever and change is the only constant. So we just have to be okay that we're enjoying it now while the flowers are in bloom and the veggies are growing, and what happens down the track, well, we will roll with that when it happens.
And I like how you're working with that. And that's really important because, as you said, gardening and growing things, they're always morphing and always changing. It's never a permanent thing. It's very dynamic. What other challenges have you seen starting a community garden?
Our first challenge happened maybe 2 weeks after we sort of got going there. So the block had been kind of dormant for a little bit, was overgrown. We had a heap of volunteers come in and clean everything up. And then we went back the next week, and there's one tap, and it's right at the front, just inside the front fence next to the water mains. And it's, would stick up on a vertical pipe out of the ground. And we got there and we were all confused because the tap wasn't there. And I called Colleen and I said, it needed a repair. And I said, have you organised someone to do something with the tap? And she said, no, it should be there. And I'm like, the tap's gone. So someone came in and cut that vertical pipe off at ground level and took the pipe and the tap and the really long garden hose that we were using to water as well. And it was just gone. And that was our first kind of challenge with the garden 2 weeks in. And we thought, okay, yep, so security is, an interesting thing. And we weren't leaving tools on site or anything at that stage. We had no sheds and nowhere to secure them. So that was when the shed became one of the higher priorities, so that we could lock our tools and things in there when we weren't there. But yeah, I mean, the garden, it has a high front fence, which was there from the demolition days when the house burnt down and was knocked down, but the side fences are low. We don't lock the front gate. Anyone can go in, and it is a community garden, and we were never going to make a fortress out of it. But yes, the theft of the front tap was something we did not expect and was a bit of a challenge. Nothing has happened like that since then, though, so just a one-off.
That is a big surprise. So volunteers are an essential way of making your community garden hum. What can people do to tap into their community garden?
I would say find one near you, or one that you like the sound of, and go and visit it during the time that it's, that the volunteers are active there, and get a feel for what's there. And don't be put off if you don't really know how to garden. If it's something you want to learn, then volunteering at a community garden is a really great way to learn how to garden, because there are a lot of people there that you can, take from their wisdom and apply it at your own house as well as volunteering. And, we are always looking for more volunteers. So if anyone wants to join us at Shelley Street Garden, Friday mornings between 9 and 11, and there's always a cracking morning tea after we've gotten the work done. So that's probably the best part of it all.
You've also used the community garden as an outdoor education space. You did have a workshop which involved many people from the community. Is that your plans for down the track?
Yeah, we always hoped it would be, I guess, an educational space from the perspective of the more people who garden, the more people will be connected to nature, will care about the planet, will live in sustainable ways, will reduce their cost for food, all the good stuff that comes with gardening. And so we always wanted to be able to share that, I guess, that knowledge with people. So we have had a couple of workshops there. The first one was about how to start an edible garden quickly, cheaply and sustainably. And obviously we were using Shelley Street as the role model for that. We've done that very sustainably. And then we had a workshop on how to sharpen and maintain your gardening tools, which is another thing that when you talk to gardeners about, it's sort of one of those ongoing things that they're like, oh, I wish I could, sharpen my secateurs, because they're always getting blunt and they're always needing sharpening. So now we know, and a lot of our volunteers came to that workshop, and it's lovely to be able to give them that opportunity as well. So yes, we have many plans for more outdoor education space, maybe involving some school groups as well would be lovely. So see what comes.
It coincides so well with the Groundswell Collective's other project with the tiny forests.
Yes. So we are about to plant another tiny forest on a school, and then one on private property after that. And then there's several more planned for this year as well. And, they share the same mission of just connecting people with nature, getting more roots in the ground, capturing carbon, doing all the good things, and just having that really respectful, reciprocal relationship with nature, and giving people an opportunity to do something practical to help the planet. I think a lot of people are looking for that opportunity but often don't know what to do. So, yeah, this gives them a chance to come and just do something as a one-off, know that they've made a difference and done something positive, and then walk away with a bit more, I guess, satisfaction and also knowledge as well.
And with increased urbanisation, where there's a lot more townhouses and units going up, places like Shelley Street Community Garden become more important to communities so people can be in touch with nature a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a complex of townhouses across the street from the garden, and a couple of them have heaps of pot plants on their veranda, on their balcony. There's a railing across their balcony, and they've got them up there to get the sun. And so there's obviously a couple of gardeners across there that we hope will come and join us eventually. But yes, the more concrete, brick, ColourBond, asphalt, everything that's in our suburbs, everything's getting hotter and more barren and drier. So we need more green space, whether it's pots on your balcony or these, Shelley Street, the backyard garden, that sort of thing. So yeah, it absolutely needs to be more green things, growing things, not lawns so much, but things that flower and fruit and produce vegetables, and give you something back for the energy that you put into it. It's so satisfying.
There's so many benefits to having a community garden, and I can hear, you've mentioned many of them about the community, which involves volunteers and just the neighbourhood as well as the plants, and how we feel has a major impact on us. What kind of tips would you have for helping our listeners start a community garden?
Get some people together first and work out that you have one time a week or 2 times a week in common where you can agree on, because you don't want that to be the stumbling block down the track. You want to know that you can all make it together. I think agree on a philosophy. So from the outset at Shelley Street, we said, we're gardening organically and we're using permaculture principles. That means no chemicals, no sprays, no poisons come on site. We don't do that. And we're very upfront with our volunteers about that. So get clear on your philosophy.
I love that as a great tip, because that's probably one of those unspoken things that people don't realise, that is an important part of establishing a good, workable community garden.
And the other tip would be to be flexible. As much as I've drawn plans for Shelley Street and I know what could happen there, I'm also very realistic about what we can do and the resources we need that we don't yet have to make certain things happen. And I also want everyone to feel like this is their garden too. So everyone needs to, as I said before, it's a democracy. Everyone needs to have a say and some input into what's going on. So be flexible in that what you want to happen may not be what ultimately happens, but something even better might come out of it.
I think they're fantastic tips for starting a community garden. And I'm sure there's many resources out there that can help you start a community garden as well.
Yeah, Community Gardens Australia has some information on their website. That's a good place to look. And then I would say go and visit some of the local community gardens too and talk to the people who work there. There's so many around Lake Macquarie, Newcastle now. But yeah, go and visit them and get a feel for what you like and what you don't like and what you do in your own garden.
I did notice that when I came to pop in at your garden, is that the volunteers that are at your garden also volunteer at other community gardens. Like, that's their thing. They love it.
They are serial garden volunteers. Yes, some of them work at least one, sometimes 2 other community gardens. Yeah, and we started around the same time as a community garden in Wanji. So we were kind of paralleling, getting things set up and stuff, which was really nice to have. Again, that's a different sense of community, I guess, around community garden, to be doing it with other community gardeners.
Thank you, Katie, so much for your time.
Thanks, Mardi.
I hope that you found this really valuable to see that community gardens are a community effort, whatever community may mean to you. There are so many benefits to starting one, but more importantly, for continuing that community garden, and how can you incorporate it in many different ways, a bit like Katie has with Shelley Street Community Garden. It's not just a garden, but they're bringing the workshop ideas into the neighbourhood as well. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the ReNewy Living Podcast. I hope you're feeling more confident about taking a localised and actionable approach to living sustainably. If this episode has inspired you to take simple action, please follow the ReNewy Living Podcast so you can catch every episode. We'd love it if you could share this episode with your friends. It's a great way to spread the word and help more people join the conversation about living sustainably. You can even send me an email with the episode that really made it for you. Hearing your positive actions for change helps me understand how these stories work within our shared communities. Head over to my website, renewyliving.com.au, for the show notes and blog posts from this episode. I look forward to sharing more stories from the people of Newcastle as we delve into our community's diverse social and environmental practices for positive planetary change from a localised perspective.